In this video, I'm going to talk about the difference between resizing your canvas and resizing your image in Penta. And if you found this video on YouTube, I will provide a link below the video where I have the illustrated pictures or illustrated steps for what I'm going to show you in the video. And I will be using the same image because my brother, he played on the Big Brother 16 here in the United States. Kevin was his friend that played in Big Brother 19 here in the US. Josh Martinez was on Big Brother 19. He was a winner. Swaggy C was also on Big Brother 20. And Steve Moses was a Big Brother 17 winner. So there's two winners in that picture there. Like I said, he met at a reality meeting where they took up and raised money for cancer victims. Alright, let me go bring up my file manager, go into my picture folder, and here's the image that I put in there. I'm going to right click and choose to open with the Penta image editor. And in a few moments it opens up. Now as you can see here, this is the default size. I can zoom in or zoom out, but for right now I'm going to use the image as you see here. Now to start with, if you look on my website, I start with resizing your canvas. So that's what I'll do in the video. When you're going to resize your canvas or resize an image, you go to your image menu on the menu bar, and here it says resize image, and here's your resize canvas. They're not identical the same thing. Like if you've got an image and you resize your canvas and you make your canvas smaller, it will appear to crop your image. So when you resize your image, the whole image will decrease. It's not going to crop the image. So when you resize your canvas and you make it smaller, it will appear as you're using your cropping feature. But that's not the only thing it does. Let me go to resizing your canvas. Now notice here, I'm already using a picture. So by resizing my canvas, if I make my canvas larger, it's going to appear larger than the picture wheel. So if I wanted to make a large, like a collage, I could pick a big canvas size and put a lot of small pictures on it. And that's where using a large canvas and small pictures comes in effect. If you're being very artistic and using the tools for creating your own image, you can choose whatever canvas size that you would like. Now on my web page at the bottom, if you're deciding to create an image for like a YouTube video, here's the requirements for YouTube. If you go to YouTube and look at their thumbnail requirements, here's some guidelines. Your thumbnail should be a 16:9 aspect ratio and have a resolution of 1280 by 720. You can also have the 1920 by 1080 as long as your images stay under 2 megabytes and in the form of a JPEG, the GIF or GIF, the bitmap, or the PNG format. So those are something you have to kind of keep in your mind as you're creating an image if you're deciding to do an image for like a YouTube video for the thumbnail. Alright, here is by resizing your image or your canvas, you can do it by a percentage or you can do it by an absolute size where you can put the width. You know, I showed you on the YouTube video the resolution size. You can put it here, but now if you choose by absolute size and you put those in there, when you change the top one, it's automatically going to calculate the top one to keep the same aspect ratio. And if you uncheck that, it may look distorted, but I'll talk about that in a few moments. Let's first look at the percentage. If I wanted to make my canvas larger, let's say instead of 100, right now the canvas size is the exact same size as my picture, the image which I have in front of you. Now the canvas is slightly different from the picture, and kind of think of it like if you're going into an art studio and you're going to create a work of art. Your canvas is the canvas that you're painting on. So your painting would be like the creation that you're doing or the picture or the image that you're putting on the canvas. So if I want to increase the canvas size, I could go to, let's say 120 or 120, and when I hit the OK button, notice what's going to happen to the picture. The picture did not change in size, but the canvas behind it did. So like for example, if I wanted to make a frame around this picture here, I could come over here to my layers and say add a new layer, move this layer below the image, and now I can click on the layer to select it, and I can come back here and say like a gray color, and I could choose the paint bucket fill in, and I could click on the background image, and it should, there it goes, it fills in the background where I've made myself a frame. Now that's just one example of where changing your canvas is different than changing your image. Your canvas size, like I said, is like a canvas where you're creating a work of art, and your image, it didn't really affect your image. So let me go back and hit undo, undo again, undo until I completely undo the image itself. That's back to the original. Let me redo where I just made the canvas larger. When you see the little gray and white lattice structure, the checkerboard structure, that just simply means that it will be transparent if you save it in the format of a PNG format. And that allows you to have other layers so that it will appear in that transparent area. Now, I will be getting into layers later, but I want to introduce you to these tools so that when we get into layers, you'll understand what's happening. Now, let me undo where the background is larger. Let me go back to Image, resize my canvas, and this time I'm going to make it smaller than 100%. So when the canvas is smaller than the image, this is where it is going to appear to crop the image. So let's say that I reduce it to 75% of its size. And when I do that and press the OK button, notice what happened. The image itself looks smaller. That's because your image cannot be larger than your canvas. You know, you cannot go into a art studio and take a canvas and make a picture larger than the canvas. It's not possible. And that's what's happening here. So when you reduce your canvas size, it's not going to shrink the size of your picture. It's going to crop the image. So let me undo, and let's look at the other part of resizing your canvas. The other one is by absolute size. If I wanted to reduce the width or increase the width, let's say from 1200 now to 1500. If I go to, well, let's say 1500, and when I hit the OK, or before I hit the OK button, I'm going to click down here. Notice that it automatically changes, and the reason it does that is it's going to maintain its aspect ratio is. Now, what maintain the aspect ratio is it keeps its height per width ratio size, so that when you're changing the height, it's going to adjust the width proportionally so that it looks the same. It's not like if I were to uncheck this and change the width, it's not going to recalculate the height. So if I change the width, it's almost like if you took silly putty, if you've ever worked with silly putty, and put it on top of an image and pulled it off, and when you change the width, it's how wide it is. And it's like grabbing your silly putty from the left and right hand side and stretching it. It doesn't change the height, it changes the width, and it looks very distorted. The people look short and wide. However, if I uncheck this and change my height, it's going to look like if you had silly putty grabbing it from the top and bottom and stretching. But if I hit OK, watch what's going to happen. It's going to make the canvas around it almost like it did when I changed the percentage on it. So you can make the canvas whatever height and width that you prefer. Let me go back and undo. Let me go back to Image, resize the canvas, and this time I'm going to change just the how high it is, not the width. So I'm going to uncheck this, and I'm going to change it from 900. I'm going to change it to like 1050. And see, when I click on this, it doesn't change. So when I hit OK, it's now put the image in the center, and that's something I haven't really talked about, the center part. Let me go back to Image, go back to Resize Canvas, and when you look here, when I go back to absolute size and when I uncheck that, you have an anchor area. By default, your image will anchor in the center, so if you resize your canvas, it will be in the center. So let me go back and cancel and undo. So when I undo back to the original image, I go to Image, resize my canvas. This time I'm going to say by absolute, uncheck my maintain aspect ratio. I'm going to increase my height back to 1050, but this time I want the image to be at the bottom so that way I can put a title at the top. So if I go to hit anchor at the bottom, now when I hit OK, now notice here the only thing I have is I'm not increasing the width. I only chose to increase the height of my canvas. So now if I wanted to create myself another layer, I could go and move this layer down, highlight this layer, and I could come in here and say add like a yellow background, use the fill bucket, fill here. Then if I wanted to go to my text tool, I could come up here and put a title on my image. So you can see by using a resizing your canvas that you can do multiple things with your image. Now if you had other little small images of people like from Big Brother, I could put some small thumbnails up here side by side so that you can see a large image and several small images across the top. And that's one way that you can use to resize your canvas. Now let me go back and talk about the aspect ratio. Now notice here when I had a, and I'm going to keep maintain aspect ratio. Look at my 1200 by 901. If I bring up my calculator, which is my Mate calculator, since I'm using Ubuntu Mate 18.04, if I took my width divided by my height, if I have 1200 divided by 901, it will give me an aspect ratio of 1.33 approximately. Now let me change 1200 to any value, and then it will recalculate this, and I'm going to show you its new value. So let's say instead of 1200 I change it to 1500. I'm going to leave the maintain aspect ratio, but when I click in height, notice what it's going to happen. It's going to automatically change to 1126 so that it maintains that aspect ratio of approximately 1.33. So let me clear. Now let me put in my new value, 1500 divided by 1100 or 1126, 1200 or 1126, and when I hit the equals, it still has the 1.33 ratio. So what your Penta tool does, or your Penta program does, is when you choose to keep the maintain aspect ratio, when you change the width, it will automatically calculate what the height must be to maintain the ratio so that it will not look distorted. Now I know that I'm talking about the canvas size, but the same thing applies to resizing your image as well. Now you don't see any distortion here other than it cutting it off. So let's go back and now apply this to resizing your image. So let me hit cancel. Let me go up to image, resize your image now. Now this is the part where your image size changes. Now if you increase the image, that means to make it larger. It will not crop it. It will automatically change your canvas size. So resizing your image, if you go to a larger image, resizes your canvas. However, increasing the size of your canvas does not resize or increase the size of your image. So if I want to go to 120 on my percentage, hit OK. Notice the image now increased in size, but it also increased the size of my canvas. So when you resize the image, it does affect the size of your canvas, but when you resize the canvas, it's not going to affect the size of your image. I hope that makes sense. Let me go back and undo. Let me go back to resize image again. Now let's go by absolute. I'm going to leave the maintain aspect ratio. So just like I did before, if I put like 1500 and come down here, it's automatically 1126, and we've already calculated that, and we know that it's 1.33. That's the aspect ratio, so that it keeps the same ratio, so it's proportionally this long to this length. So when I hit OK, it's going to increase the size of the image. Now let me go back and undo, and here's the part where you're going to understand the proportional part. So resize my image. When I come over here and click the by absolute size, I'm going to uncheck this so that it's not going to recalculate when I change either my width or my height. So when I come back to width, if I change it from 1200 to 1500 and I click on my height, it's not automatically calculating. So it's almost like disabling the internal calculator within Penta. So when I click my OK button, but before I do, let me explain what's going to happen. Here I've increased the size of the width, which means how wide it is will increase from 1200 to 1500. So it's like I said with the analogy of silly putty. It's almost like stretching out from this point to longer, but it's not changing your height. So people will appear to be wider, but they won't appear to be taller. So let me hit OK. Notice it stretched it out. Now your image appears to be distorted. So when you're using your resizing your image, when you're using it by absolute value, make sure that you understand, if you uncheck that, the program's not going to automatically calculate, so that your image will be distorted if you uncheck the maintain aspect ratio. So let me go back and hit the undo button. Let me go back to image, resize image, and show you what it looks like by going absolute value, unchecking this one, increasing the height. So instead of going 901, let's say that I go 1020. Now notice when I click here, well, I accidentally clicked up. I was meant to click the box, but when I click in the box, it's not automatically adjusting it so that it keeps the aspect ratio or keeps the image proportionally. So this is the width is now going to maintain or stay at 1200, while the height increases from 901 to now 1020. It's not going to increase much, but it will increase some, and it will appear to be the individuals will be longer than they will to be wide, so it will be distorted again. So when I hit OK, It now increased the height but did not increase the width. So now the image appears to be distorted. Let me go back, undo. Now, one thing that you notice here, if I decrease the size, let's say that I go, I can decrease it over here as well. Let's say that I go 50%. Unlike the canvas size, when I decrease the canvas size, it cropped your image. Now when I decrease the image size, when I hit OK, it's actually decreasing the entire image. It just shrinks it. So if you got like an 8.5 by 11 image that you've scanned and you wanted to make wallet sizes, you could shrink the images proportionally, or you could put the exact size. So let me undo it. Doesn't crop it. And the same thing applies with absolute. So if you know sizes, you can put widths and heights. And on my webpage, I have things that are mostly screen heights, but you can use your calculator to calculate things. Like, for example, 480p, if you're using an image of 480p and you won't make like a thumbnail or what the aspect ratio is of 480p, you can see that the width would be 720, your height would be 480. For 720p, at 16:9 ratio, that's 1280 by 720. At 1080p, it's a 16:9 aspect ratio. It's 1920 by 1080. So this chart kind of gives you some of the most popular names of video resolutions and some of the aspect ratios that go along with them and what the heights and widths should be, so that you can put that in your absolute values to match the size of your video in that case if you're making a thumbnail image. But remember, if you're using for YouTube, try to go with the YouTube thumbnail sizes, because it will look distorted if you go something different. So if I go by absolute size, if I decrease the 1200 and leave the aspect ratio, let's say that I put 600, that would be like putting 50% here. So if I go 600 and I click in the height, it's automatically going to adjust it, so it should look like exactly when I went to 50%, because you just take what 100%, that's half of it. Here I took the width half, it's going to divide the height in half, so when I hit OK, it should be the same size as my percentage. So you can do the same thing with your absolute than you can with percentages. Some people understand percentages better, so they know if I want only 75% of the height, they can put 75% here, hit enter, and it's 75% of the height. Undo. If you would like to do the 75% but understand how to do it with your ratios, you know, like say calculate what 75% of your 120, then you understand that put that width in here, and if you maintain the aspect ratio, it will calculate the height as well. So you have two ways of resizing your image. So hopefully this video has given you a little bit better understanding of what the difference between resizing your image compared to resizing your canvas is. So that if you're going to start an image, like if you're an artist and you're going to draw a picture, of course you're starting with a blank page. You're going to go in there and adjust your canvas to whatever size, and it comes up with a default size. Let me close this out and let me go File, New. And see, you can put, when you go new, you can put what ratio, like 800 by 600. You can choose what width. You can choose if you want it landscape. You can choose if you want it portrait. You can choose if you want to start on a white background or transparent background if you decide to work with layers. So let's say that I start a new image and I want to choose landscape image. So I'll choose the default. I hit OK. And this is what it looks like. So if you bring it up, now notice it started since I hit new, it created myself another image. It didn't create myself another layer. So if you're looking over here on the right hand side, a while ago when I was working with layers, I had my original image and I had the other layer and I could move it up or down. Here I'm working with a separate image. I can go back to my first image, or I can come back to my other image. So in this little box, you can work with multiple images at the same time, but this is not the same as this. So when I go up and down, I'm not working with layers. I'm working with separate images. So let's go back and let's say I go File, New, and this time if I wanted a background that's transparent and I wanted to work with something portrait, notice when I hit OK now, it's portrait and it's transparent. So if I wanted things to go in the background, I would work in this box with my layers. Down here just shows me that I've currently have 3 different images open, so I can go back and forth. Like if I'm working with a big collage or something and I wanted multiple images, I could come in here and make changes to that image, save it or copy it and paste it into this large collage And later I will work with layers, and I will work with images, but this video is just mainly to show you the differences in your canvas size and your resizing an image. And since you are using this part to work with those, I wanted to show you the difference between the layers box and the image box. So if I wanted to close out these, since there's nothing on it, I'm going to hit the close. It's going to ask me, well, it popped up a bug because I was clicking on the wrong mouse button, both mouse buttons at the same time. But since I don't really want to save any changes here, I can go File, Quit, and it may prompt me. No, it didn't, because I undid everything back to the original size. But that is the difference between your resizing your image and resizing your canvas. So by the time, if you look at this on YouTube and if you come to this website, I will have the video embedded at the bottom of this link. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can leave a comment below the video, and I'll try to get back to it as soon as possible. Now, I do plan on making additional Penta videos. It's kind of slow at the moment, so just bear with me. I will be making more. I usually put the information on the web page, and then I make a video according to the information that I have on my web page. Hopefully this has helped you, and have a great day.